how good and also how contrasted are those teams, a veteran team from North Carolina and this basically all freshman team from Kentucky?
Well, I was really lucky because I was broadcasting the game for Westwood One Sports and CBS. So I did the radio. It was an unbelievable game. I mean, I've seen, obviously, tons and tons of games in my lifetime live, from seeing the Patrick Ewings of the world to Allen Iverson to Ray Allen to great players. This game was as good a game as I've ever seen in my entire life. That was what you call you have a game like that where it's 100-100. Teams are playing fast. Teams are playing with a lot of possessions, and each team's got 10 turnovers in the game. That's it. It was an amazing game.
No, it definitely was. And when you watched this kid, Malik Monk, who, I mean, obviously he's a freshman, so we didn't know much about him unless you follow high school basketball, which I don't. He scored 47, and I know he's been erratic at times. Sometimes he's 1 for 6 from three-point range, but he was dialing things up in that game that were amazing. Is that sustainable? Obviously, he's a one-and-done kid. Is that sustainable for him and for this Calipari-led team, especially as they go play Louisville, which has the #1 defense in college basketball right now?
Well, there's no question they can sustain it. First of all, Malik Monk is a tremendous player. This guy is as good an NBA potential two-guard as you're going to find. The only question about him is maybe a tad undersized. So if I'm going to nitpick, that's what I'm going to pick. But this kid, from a shooting standpoint, from a guts standpoint, from a kid wanting the big moment, he was absolutely amazing. 47 points. And forget the 47 points. I think it's the 2 threes that he made in the last 40 seconds.
Yep.
When the game looked like it was getting away from Kentucky, Carolina takes their first lead, probably since the first 4 minutes of the game. Very easy for those kids to fold. But between Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk was 47. I was so impressed with De'Aaron Fox, who I believe is the best point guard in the country. He was amazing in that game, as quick and athletic as he is. So, yes, they are freshmen, but they were in a big-time game. They lost the lead to North Carolina, who's got a veteran team in the last minute, and still won. I think that says a lot about Kentucky.
We're talking to Steve Lappas, our outstanding college basketball analyst from CBS Sports Network. Now, you're going to be on a call tomorrow. Number 3, Kansas takes on UNLV at 9 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. We'll get to that one in a second because UNLV and Kansas I think it's an interesting matchup because of where those teams are coming from. But we'll get to it in a second. How does Louisville beat Kentucky? Because you talk about De'Aaron Fox, and this kid is so fast. I mean, he might be one of the fastest players in college basketball. How do they beat him if they can't trap him like they like to do?
Well, I think the thing about Louisville that makes this game a little bit tougher for Kentucky is that Louisville is a team that plays matchup zone. And when you're a matchup zone team, that's not something that Kentucky faces a lot or that those kids have faced a lot. So that creates, and not only that, it's not just a matchup zone, but it's an aggressive matchup zone. So I think Kentucky is going to have to really try. They're much better at a fast pace. And North Carolina is a team that wants to play fast. So there was no back down in that game. This game here, if Louisville tries to control the pace a little bit on them, that's my concern about Kentucky, and that's when the youth factor could come in. So can they play in a game that's not completely up and down, where they have to dissect the tough defense in the half court? That's the issue for them tonight.
No, it definitely is. Let me jump over to an ACC squad that I saw play a little bit against Tennessee State, and that's Duke. This kid, and I really just want to ask you about this kid, Harry Giles, who had 2 ACLs in high school. I mean, you don't tear your ACLs in high school, much less both of them. He had a little bit of run in this game, but it was closer than I think a lot of people expected. Maybe Tennessee State's one of those sleeper teams when it comes to the NCAA tournament. But what can we really expect from this kid? I mean, he's hurt coming in. Is he in danger, or is he one of those kids that will figure it out?
No, I think he'll figure it out. It's hard for a freshman, no matter how good he is, to kind of climb into the middle of the. You know what I mean? He was hurt. Now he's climbing in. They've already played a bunch of games. That becomes a tough thing to do. So I give him the benefit of the doubt there. But as far as the talent goes, he is an unbelievable, tremendous talent, and I think by the end of the year he'll figure it out. And Duke in that game, what happens is, Tiki, because you played, even though, the season's a little bit different between football and basketball, around exam time, a lot of times these kids are fried. know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
taking exams, and then they play a game, and it's not against a big-name team, and, they sleepwalk a little bit. And I think that's the case, what happened in that game. And Tennessee State's a little better than people think.
No, I think you're right. I think that's the bigger thing. Tennessee State is no pushover, and they have a grit about them. Let's go to your former team, Villanova. What is it? I mean, obviously, they're the defending champions, and they were obviously fantastic last year. Josh Hart is just a baller. Even though, interestingly, you look at the projections for the NBA, they kind of don't. Nobody loves him, even though he's scoring 20 points a game. What's it going to take for Jay Wright's squad to be in the position to repeat? Because I don't ever believe that a team's just going to go repeat, but to get in the position to do what they did last year, what do they need to continue to do?
This can be a lot harder, not only because you're trying to do it the second time around, but because this year in college basketball, as opposed to last year, you have freshmen that are going to be on the blue blood programs. You're talking about the freshmen that we talked about, Kentucky, Duke, UCLA. You're talking about guys that are at a different level than the guys they faced last year in the tournament. Last year in the Final Four, they faced one lottery pick, and that was Buddy Hield. And Buddy Hield, truthfully, if he were coming out this year, wouldn't be in the lottery. Now, this year, it's kind of like 2 years ago. What did you have in the Final Four? Karl Anthony Towns, NBA All-Star. You had Frank Kaminsky, a senior. You had Decker. You had, just great players in the Final Four. I think the problem going over this year is this is a year where you're going to need pros. You didn't need pros to win last year. And Daniel Ochefo, he was a second-round pick for Villanova. I'm talking about lottery picks. This year, I really think it's one of the blue bloods. Villanova's going to be right there. They're tremendous. But they don't have an NBA All-Star in their lineup.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to have to beat some teams that have them.
Yeah, we're talking to Steve Lappas here, our CBS Sports Network college basketball analyst. Now, the game that you guys have tomorrow night, Kansas and UNLV, it's interesting because you look at Kansas, they start the season and they lose to Indiana. Now, this is the same Indiana team that lost to Fort Wayne. Now, I understand how these early season things go, and it is what it is, but they've ripped off a bunch of wins since then. How good can this Bill Self squad be?
Well, you know what I mean? I think when we're talking about the 5 best teams in America, I think they are absolutely one of them. Right now I put them at 4. When you have a perimeter of Devontae Graham, Frank Mason's playing, I was going to say potential player of the year. I don't know what Malik Monk did to that the other day with the 47,
True, good point.
or or Josh Hart did for that with the 35 last week to Notre Dame. But Frank Mason playing at a very high level. Devontae Graham and the freshmen, they have Josh Jackson, another one of those NBA All-Stars that I talked about. So their perimeter could be the best perimeter in the country. They get enough out of their front line. And one of the most improved guys in the nation is Zvi Mikhailuk, a Lithuanian kid who was just playing tremendously, a very good shooter. So this Kansas team is very explosive. And Bill Self, he's as good as it gets when it comes to coaching. So I think they are one of those teams that could be right there. I think there's 5 teams that you will see. I'd be shocked if they're outside the top 10 at any point this year, and they are one of them.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. One that I had hoped would be there is my alma mater, the University of Virginia. And Tony Bennett's got – I mean, He's a great coach. We know this. The talent is lacking a little bit. They've fallen down in the polls just a bit, especially after that loss to West Virginia early on in the season. Where are the Cavaliers? I mean, they got some veteran guys. London Parentes is there, but the big time scorer, the guy that at some point, like a Brogdon, who we're now seeing actually play some pretty good basketball in the NBA, they don't have that guy right now.
Yeah, well, you know what happened, Tiki? The thing that killed them was the Austin Nichols, the kid who transferred from Memphis to them. Was a NBA player. He is a tremendous player. I saw him in Memphis a freshman year. I said, this guy is a pro. And he is 6'11". He could score, he could do a lot of things. And Tony did what Tony does, which is he didn't want to follow the rules. Give Tony credit. He basically bounced his best player.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. So now they've got to figure out who their scorers are. And you're right, London Parentes is a nice piece. But he's a good player when he's around other good players because he's a set-up point guard. So he's not a guy who's going to carry you offensively. So they've got to find it from different places, and I think losing Austin Nichols made it really hard on them.
Is that ultimately going to be what's going to keep Virginia from being a consistent final, Elite Eight, Final Four squad. The fact that I know this because I went there. You can't get through a clearinghouse if you're not going to go to school. If you're going to do idiotic things, you're not staying at the University of Virginia. Does that ultimately Achilles heel them?
No, I don't think so. I think that they're going to have their run. Let's face it, they had a team that was good enough last year and the year before to win the championship. I mean, they were every bit as good as Villanova. Villanova got on a run, and you know what that is. There's usually 10 teams or 12 teams or 8 teams or whatever that can win it. I coached a couple of teams that could have won it and got knocked out, because of whatever. So you know how that is. You get on a roll, good things happen. I think Tony Bennett, in my opinion, will win a national championship. I don't think it's going to be this year, but I think he's a coach that's going to be in position many years, and he will do it.
Good. I like to hear that for my alma mater and for my fellow alumni. Steve Lappas, college basketball analyst for CBS Sports Network, joins us here on Tiki and Tierney. I keep hearing these things about Michigan State and Izzo, that this might, in the end of his great run, could happen. Tell me that's not true.
Well, I mean, when we say the end of his great run, it's not going to be the end of him making the NCAA tournament. And, so they're still going to they're going to be in the thick of it. I mean, the kid Miles Bridges has been hurt, who's a tremendous. There's another one of those freshmen I'm telling you about. I mean, this kid's like Charles Barkley.
Yeah, why are there so many of them, by the way? Steve, why are there so many of them that can just come play right away? I mean, I remember when I was a freshman in college, it was like I can't even find my class, much less go play against elite talent. Why are there so many of them these days that are so good?
There's so many. It just so happens, Tiki, that this year this class is ridiculous. Last year, you only had 2 really elite freshmen, Ben Simmons, his team didn't even make the tournament, and Brandon Ingram, who was arguably not Duke's best player.
Yeah.
This year, they're projecting 13 of the top 15 picks in the NBA draft are going to be freshmen. So this happens to be a great crop. And I also think that what's happened over the years is, whereas when you were playing or when I was a kid and I was trying to play even at Division III level, freshmen were looked at like, oh, no, you play freshman ball, or, freshmen aren't supposed to be good. I think from when these kids are like 3 years old or 5 years old, they don't think anything up. They see so many great freshmen, so it doesn't faze them when they become freshmen to go out there and play. I really think the culture of what a freshman is has changed.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. And Steve, one last question before you go. Obviously, Villanova is sitting atop the rankings right now, and we think they'll hang around the top 5 for most of the year. But UCLA, a team I don't think I wasn't paying attention to be as good as they are until they beat Kentucky. How good can this squad be?
Well, when you win, I saw that Kentucky team live the other day, and to think that UCLA beat them at home at Kentucky tells you they're as good as anybody. And they've got 2 great freshmen that we talked about, Lonzo Ball and T.J. Leaf, that have made all the difference in the team. And now you have guys like Aaron Holiday and Justin Hamilton. Those guys now, Isaac Hamilton, those guys are now much better players because they have 2 other great ones to play with. UCLA is one of those teams that I'm talking about that will be in the top 5 all year.
Yeah, now how important, I mean, I lied to you, it's not my last question, because I always say this, and I kind of say it jokingly, that recruiting is half the battle, maybe even more than the battle. I mean, it really is. If you can't get these kids, no matter how good of a coach you are, you're going to lose to these kids that you don't get.
You got no chance. Tiki, I said this a long, long time ago. I thought that great coaches win with great players. Nobody wins with bad players. Nobody. And so, yes, you need to recruit. If you want to be a national championship program, you need to recruit at that level. And really, when you think about it, Villanova has been the odd champion. You don't win the championship nowadays where arguably they may not have a first-round or didn't have a first-round draft pick on their team last year. That is doing it in a different way. Most of the time, you've got to have top 10 draft picks on your team, top 15, certainly, to have a chance to win a title.